Some women live their entire lives trying to be loved, but never once get to live as themselves. There's this eerie silence you might recognize. It's the quiet that comes after you've had a silent cry. You look at yourself in the mirror and your face is swollen, your eyes are blurry, but what stops you in your tracks isn't the exhaustion you see on the surface. It's this strange, deep, unsettling feeling, almost like you're staring at a complete stranger. This isn't the woman you've spent your life trying to build, to protect, to make pretty for the world. No, this is someone else. A soul that has just stumbled out of its old, cracked shell, standing totally bare in the face of a truth you just can't deny anymore. You can't go back. You can no longer be who you once were. The famous psychologist Carl Jung talked about this. He said that our souls have this deep, innate longing for wholeness. Not perfection, not getting a gold star from everyone around us, but wholeness. It's this beautiful, rare harmony between the self you show to society and the deep, true being inside. But he also warned that to get to that wholeness, there's a phase you simply cannot skip, the phase of breaking. This is the moment when the masks finally fall. The polite smiles you didn't mean. The reluctant nods you gave when you wanted to scream. All those times you said, "It's okay," while your soul was fracturing inside. Suddenly, all of it just feels too heavy. It's too false to keep carrying. You find you just don't have the strength left to perform anymore. You don't have the energy to make everyone else comfortable at your own expense. The need to be pleasant, to be appropriate, to be just right, it's gone. And right there, in that bone-deep exhaustion, a new journey begins. Not the journey to become the woman everyone desires, but the journey to become the woman you finally choose to be. Jung called this the process of individuation. It's when a person starts to pull back from all the external noise, all the expectations, and begins to listen to that quiet voice within. It's a process of remembering who you were before the world told you who you should be, and then rebuilding yourself from the inside out. It happens quietly, without a cheering crowd, but it happens deeply, and once it starts, it's irreversible. For so many women, this journey is a radical act. They're praised their whole lives for their sacrifice, their gentleness, their obedience. But deep down, there's a silent sigh that nobody ever hears. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that isn't just some romantic, philosophical quote. It is a wake-up call. It's a whisper that can slice through all the layers of identity that women have been taught to wear for centuries. From the obedient daughter who knows just when to smile, to the sensual lover who knows exactly how to please, to the perfect mother who always puts everyone else first. These roles aren't necessarily fake, but when we live them without awareness, they become masks that slowly suffocate the soul. In Jung's work, he called these roles imposed by society archetypes. They're like ancient, universal blueprints that live in what he called the collective unconscious. Archetypes like the mother, the maiden, the lover, the caregiver, they act as internal maps to help us make sense of the world and our place in it. The problem is when one archetype gets turned up too loud, when it becomes a woman's entire identity. When that happens, she loses her sense of wholeness. A woman who is only the self-sacrificing mother might completely forget that she is also a lover, a creator, an artist, a risk-taker. A woman who lives her whole life inside the good girl archetype finds she can't say no, she can't express anger, and bit by bit, she learns to live in total silence within herself. One of the clearest signs that this inner suffocation is happening is that constant, draining battle between the image you project and the voice you hear inside. So many successful, admired, and beloved women find themselves quietly aching when they're alone, with no idea why they feel so hollow. It's because the life they are living isn't their own true essence. It's their persona. This is the social mask Jung described as our system for adapting to the world. The persona is useful. It helps us get a job, make friends, function in society. But if we cling to it for too long, If we start to believe the mask is our face, we forget who we are underneath. And then, one day, the shadow rises. Jung described the shadow as all the rejected, suppressed, and unacceptable parts of ourselves. It's the dark basement of our soul where we've locked away our repressed anger, our denied envy, our condemned sensuality, and our silenced inner wildness. For women, especially, the shadow is often overflowing with all the emotions we've been told are too much. You're too sensitive, too strong, too independent, too emotional. To be loved, to be accepted, many of us learn to hide these parts of ourselves, to push them down into the dark until the shadow becomes so big and so powerful that it finally erupts in a crisis. This can show up as an inexplicable depression that hits you out of nowhere, a simmering tension in what looks like a perfect relationship, or a complete breakdown right after you've achieved some dazzling success. It's because, as Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When we refuse to look at our shadow, it controls us from the dark. The real journey, the path to wholeness, begins when a woman stops being afraid of her shadow and starts to have a conversation with it. This is the moment she starts to let herself feel anger without feeling guilty, to acknowledge her own desires without shame. This is when she learns to say no, to decide she doesn't want something, and to walk away from the roles she once thought were her destiny. A woman going through this psychological awakening will have days, maybe even months or years, of total upheaval. It's a time when you're no longer the person you were, but you don't yet know who you're becoming. This is the messy, chaotic in-between of transformation. The masks are falling off, relationships are shifting, and your inner world feels like a construction site. But it's also in that chaos that a new self finally begins to breathe. The truth is, the darkness isn't the enemy. It's the guide. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." It's by stepping directly into the places we fear the most, the parts of us that feel not good enough, unlovable, or too much, that we finally unlock our own wholeness. And the miracle is, when a woman dares to finally face and accept her shadow, she unleashes a life force that is so real and so powerful. She becomes deeper, more compassionate, more grounded, and radiant in a way that can't be learned from a book or faked for social media. I remember a woman once shared her story with me. For years, she was the perfect wife. Always gentle, always proper, always putting her family first. But after a sudden and unexpected divorce, she completely spiraled into panic and ended up in therapy. Through that process, she had to face a devastating truth. She had never, not for one day, actually lived for herself. So she started to do things she'd never done. She started journaling. She started taking long walks alone in the forest. She tried painting. She learned it was okay to scream and to cry. And finally, one day she said, "I have no idea who this woman is that I'm becoming, but she feels more alive than I have ever felt in my entire life." That was her real self, the one that had been hidden under the weight of her persona and her shadow for decades, now being released, layer by painful layer. When a woman moves beyond her shadow and her masks, she doesn't just become a better version of herself to please others. She doesn't become a copy of some ideal archetype. She becomes herself, messy, complex, sometimes unpredictable, but always authentically real. And that truth, once you start living it, emits an energy that people around you can feel. It's an unnamed, magnetic presence. Not because she's perfect, but because she is honest, all the way down to the bone. In a world like ours, where images are so carefully curated, where emotions are standardized, and where women are constantly being told how they should be, this journey of facing your shadow, taking off the masks, and choosing yourself is nothing short of revolutionary. A woman who dares to walk into her own darkness to reclaim her own light isn't just transforming her own life. She's transforming the world around her. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of woman everyone secretly wants to be near. Not because she's trying so hard to be loved, but because she has finally chosen to love the truth of who she is. And so, when the masks have finally fallen, when you're no longer running from the shadow but are brave enough to look it straight in the eye, you cross a new threshold. But this new place isn't a land of peace and quiet. It's a landscape of ruins. It's the feeling of your old self slowly, painfully collapsing all around you. This is the phase of the journey that Carl Jung never sugarcoated, because the process of individuation doesn't start with comfort. It starts with a crisis. So the real question now is, have you ever had a fall? A fall so deep and so disorienting that it forced you to meet yourself all over again. For so many women, this rebirth begins with a psychological shock, something that feels like it's going to completely destroy them. It could be an unexpected divorce, a cold and sudden goodbye after you've poured years of your life into someone, a betrayal by a person you trusted completely. Or it can be quieter, more insidious. It can be a Tuesday morning when you wake up and you simply cannot find a single reason to get out of bed. What you thought were just feelings, just a bad mood, suddenly touches the very root of your being, and every role you play, every expectation you carry, every habit you've built your life around, suddenly feels completely hollow. It's in that precise moment of loss, when all of your external supports have been kicked out from under you, that your deepest self finally begins to speak. As Jung wrote, the person who truly wants an answer to the problem of evil in the world needs, first and foremost, to know themselves. He believed that inside our darkness, our pain, and what we perceive as evil lies a hidden opportunity to finally understand who we are. Maybe you've been in that dark room, the one where your phone doesn't ring, where the silence stretches on for so long that you start to hear the hum of your own soul. You think you're lonely, but in truth, you're finally meeting someone incredibly important, someone who has been waiting patiently for you this whole time. You. In Jung's philosophy, this is the very beginning of what he called inner alchemy. It's not about escaping your pain or pretending it isn't there. It's about the transformation of pain into awakening. Just like the ancient alchemists dreamed of turning worthless lead into precious gold, inner alchemy is the psychological process of turning your collapse into strength, of turning your wounds into doorways to your soul. A woman once wrote to a program I follow, sharing that she had lived the perfect, proper life. She had the husband, the children, a stable job, and a family that was incredibly proud of her. But one morning, after her kids had left for school and her husband had gone to work, she sat down at the breakfast table, surrounded by silence, and just burst into tears. It wasn't about anything specific. She just felt an emptiness so vast and so frightening it made her tremble. Not long after that, she sank into a deep depression. But instead of just taking medication and trying to get back to normal, she began to write. She wrote down all her hidden feelings, her buried dreams, every single time she had said yes, when every cell in her body was screaming no. And in her reading of Jung, she stumbled across this line: "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." She said she cried again when she read that, but this time, they were different tears, because for the first time in her life, her pain was given permission to exist. It was validated. It had a purpose. If you're listening to this and you feel a tightening in your chest, if you're going through something difficult right now and you keep asking the universe, "Why me?" then maybe this isn't your collapse. Maybe this is your beginning. In Jung's system, the soul doesn't just stay asleep forever. At some point, it will rise up and demand to be lived fully. And very often, it chooses to wake us up with the sharp touch of pain. What's so fascinating is that Jung never encouraged people to just move on quickly or to force themselves to stay positive. He was a firm believer that true, lasting transformation only happens when we have the courage to stay with ourselves right in the middle of the chaos, right there in the wreckage of our old lives. He He wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. To face yourself in your moment of greatest weakness isn't a sign of defeat. It is the very gateway to unlocking your true inner power. An awakened woman isn't someone who is always strong, who never falters. She is someone who knows, intimately, what it means to fall. She has lain curled up in the dark with no one calling to check on her. She has asked for help and been met with nothing but silence. She has loved other people so much that she completely lost herself in the process. But it's in those lonely, unseen nights that she is reborn from the wreckage. Not through anger or revenge, but with a quiet, unshakable commitment that she makes to herself. From this day forward, I will not abandon myself again. Think about it. Do you remember a moment in your life when you were absolutely certain you had hit rock bottom, yet somehow you rose again? That wasn't an accident. That wasn't luck. That was the sacred alchemy that Jung described. It is the profound transformation that begins not with denial or illusion, but with the radical acceptance of the truth, right where you are. In the dark, in the loneliness, in the confusion, your soul is finally learning to say, with unwavering certainty, I am mine. It's ironic, isn't it? How many people believe that an attractive woman is one who never breaks down, never cries, never shows a single sign of weakness? But in reality, the women who possess a truly healing energy, a presence that can't be faked, are the ones who have been shattered. They are the ones who have dared to sit alone with their own pain until it had nothing left to teach them. They don't have to convince you with their words. They communicate with their presence. They don't need to persuade you or make an effort to impress you, because their soul has literally been melted down in the fire and reformed from the inside out. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest gift you can receive in this life is not to be loved by others. It is to finally become yourself. So if you are in that gray zone right now, that place where the old you has collapsed but the new you hasn't fully formed yet, please don't rush to find the exit. Stay there. Feel it all. Write about it. Scream into a pillow if you have to. Like a master alchemist standing before the furnace, you are in the sacred, fiery process of forging your true self. And in that red-hot fire, a new woman is being born. Not from shiny ideals or filtered photos, but from ashes. You are so close. You may not be able to see it yet, but something deep within you is shifting. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the miracle. After the storm, while the ashes of your old life are still smoldering in your chest, something strange and beautiful begins to happen. This woman, this new you, no longer looks for a rescuer. She no longer sends long, pleading text messages trying to hold on to relationships that are already broken. She stops hoping that someone will come along and pull her out of the abyss. Instead, she begins to do something that once felt completely impossible. She stays with herself. It's not a loud, dramatic decision announced to the world. It's a quiet, profound, internal shift. It's as if her soul has finally stopped begging to be heard and has simply started to speak in its own, clear voice. Have you ever felt that? A morning where you wake up and you no longer care what anyone else thinks, and the only thing you want, with every fiber of your being, is to be honest with your own heart. That is the exact moment a woman begins to rise from within, reborn as a new, whole version of herself. A version that no longer lives to please others, but lives to stay true to her own essence. Carl Jung called this the transition from the persona, that social mask we wear, to the self, which he saw as the true center of the soul. When a woman finally sheds all those false layers and returns to her core, she is no longer a product of other people's expectations. She becomes a sovereign being. She no longer needs to be loved by someone else to feel worthy. She becomes love simply by the way she exists in the world. A woman like this doesn't need to fake her strength. She doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. She knows exactly when to speak up and when to stay silent. She can be soft without being weak, and she can be firm without being cruel, because she has finally made peace with both her light and her shadow. She is no longer fragmented, no longer at war with herself. In Jung's world, she is living in a state of what he called psychic integration, a true union of all the parts of her soul. And this is what gives her that quiet, undeniable magnetism that no one can quite define, but everyone can feel. To really understand this transformation, Jung's concepts of the anima and animus are incredibly helpful. He believed that within every person's soul lives an inner opposite. For men, it's a feminine energy, the anima. And for women, it's a masculine energy, the animus. When a woman hasn't connected with and matured her own inner animus, she often looks for it in the men around her. She seeks out partners to compensate for her own lack of direction, her lack of autonomy, or her lack of inner strength. This can lead her into unequal relationships where the other person becomes her savior, her guide, or the one person who makes her feel valuable. But when a woman integrates her animus, she no longer needs a father figure or a hero to rescue her. She begins to seek an equal partner to walk beside her. As Jung explained, the animus corresponds to the paternal logos, the world of reason, boundaries, and direction. This means that when a woman develops her animus, she doesn't just become more logical. She connects with her ability to think for herself, to make her own decisions, and to chart her own course in life. She no longer needs someone to come and rescue her from her own emotions. She's learned how to stand strong within them and act not from a place of pain, but from a place of deep awareness. I once met a woman who was the perfect example of this. After many years in a marriage where she had to constantly shrink herself to keep the peace, she finally chose to leave. It wasn't because she hated her husband. It was because she could no longer stand to betray herself. When I asked her what gave her the strength to make such a difficult choice, she said something I'll never forget. She simply said, "I've been with myself long enough now that I no longer want to abandon myself." That right there is the sign of a mature, integrated animus. It's not loud, it's not combative. It is just a clarity so profound that no one and nothing can shake it. If you are on this journey, you might feel like everything around you is changing and fast. People who you once felt so close to may now feel distant. Relationships that once felt essential to your survival now feel shallow and draining. Don't panic. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means your frequency is shifting. And when a woman begins to live in her truth, anything and anyone that is no longer rooted in that same truth will naturally begin to fall away. And the most beautiful part is this. A woman like this isn't captivating because of her looks or her clever words. She moves people with her very presence. In every glance, in every step, in every moment of silence, she carries a grounded strength that only someone who has walked through the fire can possess. And that is something you simply can't fake. Truth doesn't need to shout. It radiates in the quiet way you hold space for yourself, and from that place, you naturally learn to hold space for others. Jung once said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." A whole woman is not someone who has gotten rid of all her weaknesses or who only shows her most acceptable parts to the world. She is someone who has learned to stand with both her deep tenderness and her inner ferocity, with both her longing and her peace. And because of that, she no longer lives her life hoping to be chosen. She lives because she has finally chosen herself. Do you feel something changing inside of you? Maybe it's not totally clear yet, but if there's a part of you that has stopped trying so hard to please everyone, a part that no longer asks for permission just to exist, then you should know that the whole woman within you is rising. She is rising not from a place of perfection, but from a place of radical, brutal honesty. She is rising not so that she can finally be loved, but because she has finally chosen to love herself. And perhaps that is the kind of woman everyone truly longs to be near. Not because they need anything from her, but simply because she has become herself. And that is more than enough.
Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, Please like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next content. Goodbye.